elections. And the abstract goes as follows. Uganda is experiencing a significant youth bulge, with individuals under 30 comprising over 75% of the population. However, despite this reality, youth participation. Hello?
Yes,
Hello?
Go ahead, please. Daniel,
okay.
Go ahead.
Despite this demographic reality, the participation in parliamentary and presidential elections remains overwhelmingly confined to voting rather than active contestation. So the paper argues that this political marginalization is not accidental, but is a product of deeply entrenched systemic, social, cultural, and financial barriers. Factors such as pervasive ageism, the conflation of age with wisdom in cultural religious contests, and the prohibitive costs of running for office systematically exclude young aspirants. Existing affirmative action measures, such as the 5 designated youth members of parliament position, are shown to be largely tokenistic, providing minimum legislative influence among a parliament with a mean age of 46.8 years. The analysis, therefore, deconstructs the key impediments to youth candidacy and proposes a multi-pronged strategy for reform. We contend that meaningful change requires moving beyond superficial gestures to implement substantive electoral reforms, which will include lowering candidacy age requirements, reducing nomination fees, and introducing a more robust youth quota in that regard. Sorry about that. I don't know what this is.
Go ahead. Maybe someone from some other person has noise in the background, yes. But no, go ahead. We can hear you.
These include lowering candidacy requirements, reducing nomination fees, and introducing a more robust youth quota system. Furthermore, we advocate for the promotion of structural, intergenerational, intercultural, and interreligious dialogues to dismantle the cultural prejudices that sideline youth, thereby fostering a more inclusive and representative political landscape for Uganda's future. Right now, Uganda stands at a demographic crossroad. The most recent national census reveals a striking reality. 75% of our population are youth. The bulge presents both an immense opportunity for a demographic dividend and a significant risk of socio-political instability if this vast segment of the population remains excluded from the corridors of power. Leadership is a fundamental aspect in every community. We argue that most young Ugandans are often introduced to the world of politics very early in school through systems of student leadership at a given school. They learn from the onset how to campaign, how to pitch ideas, and become the embodiment of a leader as they contest for these various positions. This form of leadership is carried forward throughout up to the university, where stakes tend to get higher and these young people face their first true tests of leadership. Beyond school leadership, most highly motivated youth tend to seek and create relations with existing political parties in order to harness and channel their political and leadership capacities into more meaningful and relevant public service contests. It is worth noting that these young people tend to be given relegated functions within these political parties as opposed to positions of influence, real influence, therefore never getting a real shot at leadership. The current political landscape is therefore not reflective of a leadership culture designed to preserve and nurture young aspirations. Rather, it's characterized by a stark generational disconnect. While young people are mobilized in large numbers during election seasons as voters, campaigners, polling agents, their presence on the ballot is really conspicuously minimal. The paper therefore seeks to address the relegation of youth to the periphery of electoral contestation. When young candidates do emerge, they are often disregarded by an electorate conditioned by an entrenched gerontocratic system, one reinforced by cultural norms, religious teachings, and social hierarchies that equate leadership with age and experience. Now, if the mean age is 46 years, it starkly contrasts with the median age of the national population, which is 16. The paper therefore posits that the structural and cultural barriers preventing youth from contesting elections are detrimental to Uganda's democratic dividend and development. This tokenism, embodied in the creation of 5 youth members of parliament, has proven insufficient to grant young people a substantive voice in legislative decision-making. Consequently, the political scene remains dominated by elders and established elites, perpetuating a cycle where the idea of youth leadership is rarely entertained by the electorate. This analysis, therefore, should explore the multifaceted barriers from age-based discrimination and ambiguous electoral roles, limited contexts of democratic participation for youth, to financial hurdles and knowledge gaps that consequently curtail youth involvement in the broader parliamentary and presidential elections. Ultimately, the article argues for a paradigm shift. Youth participation must evolve from the passive act of voting to the active right to contest and lead at both the parliamentary and presidential level. It therefore ought to step beyond youth participation in only youth positions within the political party structure. To achieve this, we propose a series of integrated electoral and social reforms, including promotion of intergenerational dialogue, the lowering of candidacy ages, reduction of financial barriers, implementation of meaningful youth quota systems in parliament, etc. Understanding the scale of youth exclusion requires an appreciation of our demographic and political context, as we've seen from the population. And thus, this disconnect, you can see, is evident in the national legislature. The generational gap is not merely a number. It also represents a divergence in priorities, communication styles, and lived experiences. Policy debates on issues critical to the youth, such as unemployment, access to digital technology, modern education, and mental health, resultantly lack the urgency and informed perspective that younger legislators would provide. The existing mechanism designed to bridge this gap, which is the youth member of parliament system, is fundamentally flawed. With only 5 representatives, 1 for each major region and 1 national female representative in a parliament of over 500 members, their collective vote constitutes less than 1% of the total. Their ability to influence legislation, challenge established party lines, drive a youth-centric agenda is inherently structurally constrained from the onset. They exist as a symbol of inclusion, a form of affirmative action checking a box rather than a functional vehicle for effective youth participation. Such tokenism only serves to pacify demands for representation while simultaneously maintaining the existing power structure, thereby effectively preventing any genuine shift in the status quo. The obstacles preventing these young people from running for office are complex, and indeed they are interwoven. They are categorized in 3 main areas: sociocultural, structural, and financial and knowledge-based barriers. At the heart of youth inclusion lies that deeply ingrained culture of gerontocracy, where power, especially political power and wisdom, are perceived as being exclusively the domain of the elderly. In many communities, tradition dictates deference to older individuals, a norm that extends even in the political arena. Voters are often conditioned to prioritize a candidate's age and perceived life experience over policy proposals, qualifications, or innovative ideas. We also note that things such as religion and culture play a critical role. The financial cost of political contestation is arguably the single greatest deterrent for young people who often are not even employed. For example, in 2021 general elections, the nomination fee was $3 million, approximately $800, while presidential nomination fees were $20 million, $5,400, which is even still the case today. These figures do not include the exorbitant costs of running a campaign, which involve printing posters, media advertising, transport, mobilizing supporters. Thus, without access to significant personal wealth or elite patronage networks, a young candidate cannot compete on a level playing field. It is also unclear and inconsistently applied electoral laws that create confusion and serve as a tool for disqualifying less experienced candidates. The other challenge is political party structures are also a problem. Youth leagues are not as strong as they should be. They don't necessarily come from the grassroots. We can see what we had with the NRM youth elections that symbolize the use and discard approach stifles the political growth of young members, treating them as instruments rather than future leaders. In most of these youth elections, the delegates are even abandoned by the person who has fundraised for them to come and vote if that person has lost. And in any case, they will never go ahead to face them again after that. So to move beyond the current state of political exclusion, a comprehensive and multifaceted approach is required. The goal should be not mere inclusion, but empowerment of youth to meaningfully contest and participate. We therefore propose a framework centered on cultural reorientation, legislative reform, and capacity building. We propose the establishment of national and local platforms for intergenerational, intercultural, and interreligious dialogues to be able to curtail the deep-seated biases against youth. And therefore, the objectives would be to bridge that perception gap by allowing elders to understand the perspectives and capabilities of youth and vice versa. Also to promote mentorship by creating relationships where experienced politicians, community leaders, and others can guide aspiring young candidates, and also redefine experience to include not just age, but also modern skills, technological literacy, and innovative problem solving. Media campaigns that celebrate successful young leaders in various fields can also help shift this gap. Cultural shifts must be supported by concrete changes to the legal and electoral framework, which would maybe include lowering candidacy age and reducing fees. It would include introducing a substantive youth quota. It would include campaign finance reform and many other things. Finally, empowering youth requires equipping them with necessary knowledge and skills. While civil society organizations, the EC, and education institutions should collaborate and roll out this, we are not limiting it to them alone. We are also considering the church and traditional institutions. They can focus on electoral rights and processes, campaign management, leadership and governance, among other things. The way forward, therefore, requires bold and intentional action. It involves societal commitment to challenging long-held prejudices. When you lower these financial and legal barriers, you're able to cause Uganda to transform its legislature into a body that truly reflects the populace it serves. It's a prerequisite for unlocking the immense potential of its greatest source, which is its young people. Moving youth participation beyond the ballot box is therefore essential for building a more inclusive dynamic, and prosperous future for all Ugandans. So that is the abstract by myself and then Michael Mwanda that we have presented to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that elaborate presentation done there. And so let's welcome comments, questions, and another will join us to our presentation. So members present, the floor is open now for you to give comments, questions. We joined us to Daniel Ruhweza's present abstract. Abi? Are you ready?
Yes, please.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Daniel. This was very amazing. It was touching me terribly. I mean, I appreciate it so much. I tried to outline the key issues you raised. They were very much touching. More especially issues relating to disfranchising youth through the electoral structures, even at micro level by the parties. These are real important issues you raised. However, I wanted to think like this. When you look at the participation of youths in political parties, and more specifically NUPI in Uganda, you see huge number of youths participating in those activities, and it seems they like their party. Let me make it that way. It seems they like their party. I do not know why, but I think would it be good if such an incentive is opened in other political parties, the way youths participate in political activities of
the last two sentences, we have missed them.
No, sorry. Okay. Let's first have the comments and questions, then we shall go back. When you are responding, you can highlight those two questions you missed. Don't worry. This is working progress. Okay.
Yeah, do you get me now?
Habib, are you done yet?
No. I just wanted to now pose one question.
Okay, please do.
Yeah, thank you. Daniel, how do you think if we quickly opened, say, created a political environment where there's really free participation in the politics of political parties, such that they operate like in other countries, so that youth pick interest in participating in political affairs of the country or electoral processes, rather than, fearing the arrest, fearing the tear gas, fearing the illegal detentions, fearing. Would that general environment created for political activities in this country open up for the youth to participate, other than probably talking at the party level and something like that? But otherwise, I was extremely moved by your presentation, and indeed, I like it. Thank you.
You, Habib, next. Michael, do you have any questions or comments?
No.
Yeah?
Hello.
About Pilot. Pilot, do you have any questions or comments? Habib, Daniel is requesting that you could type those questions so that you can take note of them. He didn't hear well. Is it possible to do so?
Yes, please, I can do that.
Okay, kindly do that. Pilot. Let me put just a question. My question. Daniel, did you manage to review the constitutions of political parties to ascertain whether there is an age limit to being a member of the top organs of those political parties? Daniel.
Can I answer now? Can I answer?
Hold on a bit, maybe we have another question or comment. But remember, my question was, did you manage to
Yes,
get
I've
time
had
to-
the question.
Okay. Okay. Any other more questions from the audience? Pilot? Okay, if there are no more questions about Daniel's presentation, abstract presentation, can Daniel quickly respond what has been raised in relation to his
Okay.
abstract? Daniel, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. We have not yet reviewed the constitutions of other political parties. That one is something we can do. We've
Yes.
also been able to access the manifestos of the most recent manifestos that have been launched. We have access to those ones as well. So we shall review them to see what they are saying, and then we can add that to our discussion in that regard. So yes, that is a good insight for us, which we shall do. Number two, a question from Habib is, would it be possible to motivate youth participation in politics by creating generally enabling political environment? Of course, I think so. I think if the political environment was better than we have today, because I think one of the things Dean and I we shall speak about as well in the paper is how the participation of youth in elections has now been criminalized. The drilling has been criminalized, holding certain flags has been criminalized. I mean, it's like you participate in a political party that is in opposition at your own risk. And therefore, if there was a way to create this enabling environment, it would help a lot. In fact, the reason our paper is structured the way it is, where we are arguing that beyond the ballot, we must have that very environment that makes it possible for politics to happen, in my view, is the ideal situation. How do we improve the political environment to make it suitable for people to participate in this political environment, especially the youth? And so, of course, we know, we are aware that without specific leadership from the top, our top leaders, the ones in charge, providing more room. And that's why we are talking about intergenerational conversations. Without that happening, it will become extremely difficult. But I do agree that it is something we need to do in that regard. Thank you very much.
Okay. Some people joined when Daniel was just started presenting all the done presentation. There is Pilot, there is Rugarambi. Rugarambi, you are welcome on board. Rugarambi. Mr. Rugarambi.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you. No, I was trying to unmute. Yeah, thanks. I'm following.
Okay.
Thank you.
Did you try to follow Daniel's presentation, even if you are not yet on board?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Okay, is it possible that you can raise a question, a comment where you joined that was presentation?
Yes, yeah. Thanks, Daniel. Just a question on methodology. If I didn't miss it, what is really the core of your methodology from an empirical point of view? What is the empirical foundation of your study? What kind of data do you plan to collect, or is it a purely conceptual piece of work?
Thank you very much. It is, at this stage, it was mainly a conceptual piece of work without necessarily going to the ground and digging up, mainly relying on maybe some literature reviews and things like that. But if the guidance is for us to dig deeper, we can do so. I've done some work before in this area with SEDU, the defunct SEDU, and produced a paper there. And so I have some background information, but mainly it will be really conceptual without necessarily delving into interviews and other kind of material. But we remain open to guidance in that regard.
Thank you. It would be important for purposes of this project that issues of methodology will have to arise. So prepare to have an appropriate methodological design methods appropriate for your papers you develop it further. Thank you, Lord Ruhweza, for that observation. Any more?
Good afternoon.
Yes, good afternoon.
Yes, please. I'm on.
Go ahead.
I've been following in from the very start, and I think this is really a wonderful paper. The fact that youth are majority of the population and they are the future of Uganda. So I have two comments. One, the challenge that most youth are facing in this country is that they're really disorganized. Most youth groups you meet, they're really disorganized. So I have a comment for Daniel. How best can we organize our youth groups to have, one, clear purpose, a clear vision of what they want, in line with what you are talking about, Uganda's politics? That is the very first question. Then secondly, the issue of finances is also a big hindrance to why most youth are not participating in the elections. For example, the presidential elections, someone is asked to raise over 20 million, and then you find actually, let's say half of the population who are youth can't afford that. So one, what remedies would you recommend, especially in that financial bit, so that most youth can actually be able to participate in the elections, especially at the very higher levels on top? So I think those are my two comments. But otherwise, this is so wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Dini. Any more comments, questions, and rejoinders to Daniel's presentation? What have Daniel's presentation? Right. So, we can go. Pilot. Pilot, we need the comment, observation, or question from you too. I hope you listen to all or part of Daniel's presentation. Pilot, can you hear me? Yeah. So, as we wait for the second presentation, Daniel, can you add the two sentences maybe and explain them? You said you had omitted some.
Yes.
Some two sentences in your presentation you had missed out. Would you have the present to us those two sentences and maybe and expand on them and explain to the audience from what you meant from the two sentences?
Yes, I could respond to Raphael's question. How do we mobilize the youth? I think at this point we can only postulate I believe strongly that we need to equip, as we see here, empowering youth requires equipping them with the necessary knowledge skills. And here we advocate, we acknowledge civil society organizations, the Electoral Commission, and educational institutions should collaborate and roll out extensive civic education programs, which would go beyond simply teaching youth how to vote, but we also highlight that they could focus on electoral rights, which are detailed training on the nomination process, not just the nomination process, but legal requirements for candidates and how to protect their rights during an election. And then campaign management. This includes workshops on fundraising, public speaking, policy development, and grassroots organization. We talk about leadership and governance skills, where we hear it's about training on legislative processes, budget advocacy, and constituency engagement to ensure that once elected, young leaders can be effective. The continued inexperience can then be addressed in that regard. Now, we remain open to other ideas that we might find as we develop the substantive chapter, but I think that could be a good starting point for now. Financing remains a big issue. We acknowledge that as well, and we highlight it here that campaign finance reform is important. We need to introduce and enforce regulations on campaign spending to help curb the influence of money in politics, making it more feasible for candidates without deep pockets to compete based on the strength of their ideas or the strength of their character. Finances are a huge issue. We highlighted it up here that right now, nomination fees are 3 million, and for member of parliament, 20 million for presidential, and this is quite expensive. And in addition to that, we know that there is also, the exorbitant costs of running a campaign, feeding your supporters, feeding your mobilization team, and so on and so forth. So we are right now of the view that we need to reflect, why does the Electoral Commission maybe ask for this money, and yet it is a budgeted item already. The country has already budgeted for elections. Why should, especially with the young people, why should they be asked to pay these amounts of money? Maybe it's a way of curtailing some from participating, but we know that there is no financial institution that is going to support you in this election. So if we are very serious about promoting elections, we need to revisit the whole idea behind campaign financing, etc. So it is just a conversation we shall continue to have with Dean. And I don't know that, Dean, you're able to unmute and also say a word or two in that regard.
Okay. I hope I am heard. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, that's good.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Dean.
So there was a comment. There was a comment made by Habib on an environment, an enabling environment. I think this starts with putting in place an environment that tolerates dissent in the first place, because it's not all about a politically enabling environment, but an environment that first of all can tolerate dissent. Once you can tolerate dissent, then the youth stop being afraid of taking leaps into leadership. I will just give a small example of what happened when there was anti-corruption protests. Those anti-corruption protests were the Gen Z version of protests that happened in Uganda following what had happened in Nairobi, Kenya. But the approaches, you can see that in one jurisdiction, dissent was tolerated. In another one, everyone was rounded up and then arrested and then put behind bars and then charged. And some of them are working with criminal records, though not yet convicted. But that's already a disadvantage to them, because if you're presenting, for example, a CV somewhere or an application letter for a job somewhere, they're going to ask you if you've ever been arrested or you've ever been held or detained because of an offense that you've committed. So while the youth were thinking that they were exercising democratic rights, they essentially ended up being looked at as criminals. And now you can't access jobs, you can't access promotion opportunities because of an environment that does not tolerate dissent. So that is number one. Creating the enabling political environment alone without ironing out the other critical issues is not sufficient. It will not be enough to change the political direction of our country, of Uganda. The other thing about finances, I think, has been addressed in our paper. The most crucial aspect was the methodology. I think we shall discuss with I will discuss with Dr. Daniel on how exactly we are going to do this. And genuinely, thank you for your comments on the paper. They are really encouraging. Thank you.
Welcome. So some of the issues you people raise, one of the critical issues you raise is the youth have the numbers. And you say you are the majority part of the population, and therefore you feel you should be well represented in higher levels of political party organs other than being given tokenism for youth positions in political parties. You also talk about issues of money being a problem. I'm just going to give an example, and in one of the issues you should actually explore is, can the youth themselves fund such kind of political projects they tend to undertake? They have the numbers, and MTN does not earn huge monies by collecting millions from each customer. They do that by collecting actually small monies, 200 shillings, 100 shillings. So if you have the numbers, what makes it impossible, if you were mobilized, for you, the youth, to mobilize actually even billions to be able to fund your campaign? What makes it difficult? Can you also try to explore that area? How can the youth themselves do what? Fund their own campaign? Or do you need to buy a fellow youth food or lunch when they come to support you? Can they take it as part of the sacrifices they have to make in order for them to have party positions since they have the numbers? So how do you explore the issue of the numbers in relation to overcoming challenges such as financing and also holding top party positions? Daniel and Dean, what do you think?
Yes, that is a good question that we can
You have the numbers,
evaluate.
the youth have the numbers, it is true. You have the figures, so how do you intend to explore that element such that the youth, they themselves can be forced to reckon with, first of all, by raising their own funds, and you don't need to collect so much from each youth. You also have to sacrifice. Attending a rally does not cost you anything. You need to buy people land. If they really want their youth members to be part and parcel of the top political organs in the country. I think you would explore also that element.
Okay.
No, you may not, because it is true, youth don't have jobs, and they may not be able to raise the money as individuals. But as a group, can they be able to raise their own finances? What challenges would they face in doing that, trying to do that? Opportunities and challenges in trying to raise their own finances, because they have the numbers and they don't need much money from each individual. And they are also modern technologies of mobilizing that money through, let's say, mobile money apps. They
Okay.
also have the numbers if it comes to the political process is all about the numbers, voting. How can we be able to mobilize ourselves as the youth to be able to overcome? We were calling it the old age, because the other element is that youth is a transition age. It's not a permanent age. So how do you make sure that the youth of today will be able to mobilize the youth of yesterday and be able to be the adults of tomorrow that will have demonstrated that youth can be tapped into and contribute effectively to the democratic processes in our country? Thank you.
I wanted to
Go
respond to
ahead.
that
Yes.
of fundraising. One of the reasons it's too early for us to consider a national youth-wide fundraising effort is because, one, we are not galvanized politically as youth. We all have our different priorities. There is a lack of basic civic education and political education. So a nationwide contribution scheme, or how do they call it? There is
Mobilization scheme.
a GoFundMe type of scheme for one political candidate is, at this stage, it's premature, in my view, mainly because we lack basic civic and political education. So we will not understand, someone in Kampala will not understand a political ideology being brought up by someone who, for example, lives deep in a village, or someone deep in the village will not relate with the political aspirations and ideology behind a political aspirant, his age-mate in Kampala. So now you have those two divergent views, and they exist because there is a lack of basic civic and political education. If there is a meeting of the minds on the basics of political ideology, on the basics of where a particular contestant is coming from, it becomes very easy to galvanize the entire youth population to back one person, to even fund that person's campaign, because even in the United States, campaigns are funded by very, very rich groups of people. So here, if we are looking at something on an individual basis, but collectively as youth, you have to consider the fact that you have to first change the ideology. You have to first change the way people think. You have to first bring them on board, sell them the idea, let them buy the idea, and then let them invest in you. Because that is the only way then you can then talk about the generations that come after. As you've said, that youth stage is a transition stage. It's not forever. If we can start now, then it becomes easier for the coming generations to understand the need to have certain types of ideologies and to contribute to certain types of ideologies as well. But currently, as is, we can just start with the basics. Education, stuff like that, and then we go up. We are building the pyramid.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Yeah, me, I would suggest like you could do, you raise some of the, like one of the hurdles is civic education. And how the issues you should extract from during your paper is to look at how the educated youth can come up with platforms to mobilize. Because for you already exist, you have structures like education institutions, you have structures, the presidents, the guild, you have the guilds in universities, you have the guilds in other tertiary institutions. How possible is it that you are instead of waiting for the electoral commission is not in charge of promoting civic education. They are supposed to promote water education. Civic education is the responsibility of, I think, Human Rights Commission in Uganda. Human Rights Commission in the Ministry of National Guidance. So how do you plan to overcome issues of those institutions not doing what they are supposed to do, but you, the youth, taking the initiative to mobilize other youth, both in school and out of school. It's a very critical element that will enrich your paper. Because you can't sit and say, oh, even US elections are funded by rich millionaires. Here we don't have millionaires. But I was saying you have the numbers and you can use the numbers to mobilize the necessary funds. If you would consult with any one of the university guilds, how much money do they raise is it per year? Because there are those charges for each student. Try to find out how much they pay, how much the guilds raise from students. It's quite substantial amounts of money. If you could mobilize other youth, maybe border youth, all that, it would be very important and enriching so that to demonstrate that without
we shall be able to.
And it would be a very good example it would be a very good example for upcoming democracies, especially focusing on the youth, that the youth can also be a force to contend with when it comes to being self-sustaining in terms of contesting for raising their own resources, because they themselves are a resource. That element should be explored during your paper. And you can dig deep and find out from university groups how much they raise. Or community-based youth associations. There are some like circles, how much do they operate and how do they raise funds? There are some prosperous youth circles initiated by the youth themselves that really provide the social responsibility support at local level. Try to explore that and demonstrate that it is possible for the youth to mobilize their own resources for political activities without necessarily support of any businessman or electoral commission.
Yeah, we can explore that as one of the solutions to the financial question.
Even the civic education element,
other examples.
Even the civic education element, because you have a bit, youth in the higher education institutions have got a better understanding of the laws and policy frameworks in place, guiding the political processes and all other things. It would be very important that you also look at the two elements, how youth are being resourceful can be able to handle those issues without the support of an external force. That means you would be an independent and a force to reckon with once you take those issues as your mantle to contest with the older generation in relation to political power propositions in the political parties. And
yes, it is something we can explore to find out whether there are examples where such mobilization has actually occurred, and also further explore whether the youth in tertiary institutions are actually more knowledgeable than those who are not. Because we may be surprised when we find that those who are not in tertiary institutions are more politically savvy than those who are in the chain of education. You know?
They call it civic. So what you try to explore is the levels of civic competence between the educated youth and youth in school and youth out of school. It will also be an interesting aspect to explore as you try to see how those two issues can be explored further to make the youth self-reliant. Religious institutions also can be another area you can consult during your research. During your research when you are trying to enrich this paper, because they have got youth organizations, youth structures. Also a very good example you can find out, you can learn from on how they mobilize them, how they mobilize them for civic education in relation to their institutions, how they mobilize resources through them, financial resources through them, and by them. That's also very important. Any more comments? We joined us to their presentation. Certainly nothing. Should we close? Any more comments to Daniel Ruhweza and his colleague, Michael? George Galambi, anything to say?
Nothing more from me.
Okay, nice. I'm afraid we are unable to have the second presentation by Nantongo, Namansa, Proscovia. So we are coming to the tail end of our today's abstract review. And I would like to thank the presenter, Daniel Ruhweza, for a wonderful job done, and also his colleague for the tremendous support. We hope from our comments and rejoinders, you're going to enrich your paper, and next time it will be a very well done piece of work. Once again, Baganda David is my name. I've been the host at CBR, and I would like to close this session and wish you a very nice evening. Thank you very much for your effort and the presence. Have a nice evening once again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.